Roman Cymbaluk, blogger and journalist, joins us on our broadcast. Let's discuss all the most important things as of today. Roma, hello. What do you think about the story that the White House was offended because Trump wasn't nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize? So in fact, he wasn't awarded it, even though he wanted it.
Hello, Alexander. We all want Donald to get the Nobel Peace Prize, but it has to be earned, of course. So he still has a chance. But if you look at it from a formal point of view, the Nobel Prize is given for events that you accomplished a little earlier. It's for the previous year, after all. And at that time, Donald hadn't yet stopped 8 wars or set out to stop another one. And most importantly, everyone in the White House needs to be told clearly that until Vladimir Putin is stopped, all their efforts don't count. Because stopping Vladimir Putin was certainly supposed to be, one of Donald Trump's primary campaign promises. And without truly ending this devastating war, without decisively driving the Russian forces back to their own country, it's probably not going to work. So, in my opinion, this whole story is like that. There's more hype in it than substance. Let's be honest, nothing really depends on the Nobel Prize. And strangely enough, Barack Obama has one. And at a meeting with Alexander Stubb, Trump said that Barack received the prize undeservedly. That's an absolutely accurate observation, because in 2014, he was parading around with the Peace Prize while Russia started a war in the center of Europe.
All right, and what do you think about the news that Latvia or your Estonia are planning to evacuate a total of 1.2 million people in the event of Russian aggression, say, to other regions that might be farther from the line of Russian invasion? Right now, they're actually developing an entire program and calculating threat scenarios. Is this a good signal, or is it a very bad signal that, I don't know, tells the Russians, go ahead, evacuate everyone?
Listen, everyone is learning from our mistakes. And if you want peace, prepare for war. This rule has always worked everywhere. When you're preparing to repel aggression, it's a multi-layered process. This includes engineering structures at the border, mining, concreting, and so on. And one aspect of it is the evacuation of civilians. Right now, we have a national program to bring Ukrainian children back from occupation, but let's be honest, if Mariupol had been evacuated, if there had been enough time, if everything had been calculated, maybe the consequences wouldn't have been so severe. I'm saying this because many countries have looked at this and concluded that it's better to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Buying bombs, missiles, F-35 planes, for example. Even Russian television got agitated over the fact that Germany is buying iodine tablets just in case. What case? In case of nuclear war. And I think everyone is now convinced that Russians are truly cruel, fanatical, and you have to be ready for anything. So this doesn't mean that Russians won't kill if they enter the territory of the Baltic states.
You keep track of Russian statements in the context of the news about Donald Trump and Tomahawk deliveries, I know. And I want to ask you this. Putin says that the talk about Tomahawk strikes on Moscow, which Zelensky mentioned, is all just blackmail and bluffing. But in reality, how do Russian generals and experts assess the possibility of Tomahawk strikes on the Russian capital and beyond?
Well, in general, there's no consensus on whether they'll actually be delivered or not. Let's be clear. There are no missiles yet. There's just this political message, like stop the war or else Ukrainians will get Tomahawks. Putin's response is not to stop the war, and what happened last night in Kyiv, and not just in Kyiv, is pretty good evidence of that. As far as I know, we don't have any Tomahawks here. Yes, they're beautiful and impressive missiles that we'll see on our screens, but personally, I'd prefer the same kind of beautiful missiles, only our own. Why? Because the political decision to transfer them can be so distant, complicated, and so on. Besides, when Americans are at war and want to achieve political goals, they launch hundreds of these missiles. For now, I don't see any signs that we'll get them in such large numbers. But overall, the fact that they perceive this as reality, and for example, how Putin reacted to it during his press conference in Dushanbe, he said that they would strengthen their air defense. In other words, they treat this as an absolute reality. Well, we will, how should I put it, hope for Tomahawks, but at the same time build our own Neptunes and accordingly rely on products from companies like Firepoint, which in turn make flamingos.
What do you think about the Russian draft? How easy or difficult is it now to send the Russian population to war? Let me explain the essence of my question. The Russian authorities have already fully launched the electronic summons registry and have begun to massively restrict travel abroad for everyone for whom the military enlistment office files documents. According to the Baza channel, for example, the ban comes into effect immediately after the summons is added to the digital registry and a notification is sent through the Gosuslugi government services portal. These notifications usually arrive around 6 a.m. and after 6 a.m. you can no longer leave Russia. Please tell us if you don't show up within 27 days. That means you're a draft dodger and that's it? You are automatically put on the wanted list? How are Russians feeling about mobilization and what is their mood about going to war now?
Well, actually, this news describes places where there are no military enlistment offices. And in Ukraine, this is a very sensitive topic because war is hard, it's frightening, and it's truly a national ordeal. But when someone says that over there everyone is a volunteer, everyone is rushing to the draft office to sign up and die for Putin, it turns out that's not quite true. It turns out that over these 3.5 long years of war, they've completely changed all their legislation in this area, digitized everything. For example, in Russia, not registering for military service is punished much more harshly than in Ukraine, where you might just get your driver's license nullified or have some other minor penalty. There are a lot of such nuances, including those related to the banking system. So strangely enough, Russians complain about our mobilization, but at home they are building this system that, if necessary, will allow them to count every last Russian and pull them out of every apartment, whether it's in Moscow or some smaller Russian city. In general, this policy is aimed at bringing their mobilization resources to a fully accounted state, and they've done it. And again, the ZEED War correspondents aren't just singing songs and writing sad posts for nothing about how the average Russian soldier lives exactly 12 days, 12 days including the training ground and the first day at the front line, where he meets a Ukrainian drone. And it's clear that, to put it mildly, there aren't many people willing to go. And the word mobilization means different things in different circles. That is, open mobilization, or what they're doing now, mobilization for money, is in fact the same mobilization measures, just using different methods. So this word mobilization in its classic sense is coming up more and more often, and we need to take that into account. Sure, we could laugh about how Putin deceived the Russians, but for us, it's probably no laughing matter, because these same hordes will be sent to Ukraine.
100%. I also want to discuss with you Putin's apology to Aliyev. At the CIS summit in Dushanbe, he said, first of all, that Ukrainian drones had entered Russian territory and that this was also a reason for the Azerbaijani airliner being hit. But then he did admit that it was actually Russian air defense that exploded near the plane, which caused the aircraft to crash. And after that, he asked Aliyev to turn the page and continue building relations on mutually beneficial terms. Although at the end, he couldn't help himself and blurted out that Azerbaijan is practically a Russian-speaking country as well. In doing so, it seems to me, he once again put Aliyev in his place. Tell me, please, is Putin managing once again to re-establish contacts with countries that, frankly speaking, have recently been putting Russia in its place? And what is his current position now?
I think this Cold War mode will remain, no matter what anyone says. After all, this meeting took place within the so-called CIS framework, and Russia's influence in the so-called post-Soviet space is overall being reduced to zero. In general, what was this event? What did they come up with there? They came up with the Dushanbe format CIS Plus. What this means is that now, as an observer, there will be the Secretary General or the head of the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So basically, CIS Plus means plus China. We all remember why this was created in the first place, essentially for Russia to control the newly formed states that emerged after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But now even the People's Republic of China is officially present there. As for Azerbaijan, I wouldn't even frame the question as to who pressured whom, but it's clear that if the Tsar is apologizing, then the Tsar has in some way bent the knee. But the Azerbaijanis, Azerbaijan as a whole, officially Baku, are no longer aligned with that country. They are our allies and have sent a lot of humanitarian aid to Ukraine. Some say it's not just humanitarian aid, but their goal is not to enter into a war with Russia. So if you look into it, are they really demanding something outrageous? Well, fine, you could call it an accident. Although, again, if your air defense shoots down a civilian aircraft in your own airspace, well, it's your airspace, so you're responsible for it. And there wouldn't have been any conflict at all if first the Russians had acted like normal neighbors, as anyone would, paid compensation, covered the cost of the plane, and said, sorry, this was unfortunate. But the problem arose because the Russians thought they could kill anyone with impunity. That's what it's all about. So if we return to Russian-Azerbaijani relations, there's really no love, brotherhood, or even more so, any prospect of Azerbaijan returning to Russia's sphere of influence. That's simply not on the table. And honestly, I can't help but laugh a little as I say it. All these stories about Russian speakers, well, I want to say that in Azerbaijan, most educated people speak Russian and English very well. It's only in Putin's imagination that the Russian language is perceived as some kind of marker of being pro-Russian. Here in Ukraine, there's also a lot of Russian language, and you and I are speaking Russian right now. So what did that give us last night? In my opinion, both you and I, for our loved ones, our neighbors, and really all citizens of Ukraine, they just wanted to wipe us out, regardless of how well we speak Russian. And we speak Russian quite well, even by the standards of a typical Russian. So let's drop the topic of the Russian language. The key point is, for example, what about the assets of Azerbaijanis in Ukraine, which were bombed by the Russian army? There are a lot of such nuances that can come up. And something tells me that Azerbaijan will still be a competitor to Russia when it comes to supplying hydrocarbons to Europe. I mean, that's one of the alternative options. And for Azerbaijan, Turkey has always been the main ally, and it will remain so. So I can't accept the position that Putin managed to bend our colleagues to his will somewhere across several seas, right?
Well, he's trying. He's trying. He gathered the Arab states for the first ever Russian-Arab summit, which Putin himself announced back in May. But as far as I understand, no one except the president of Syria confirmed their attendance. They invited the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, the head of the organization. Oh, right, the president of the United Arab Emirates was supposed to come, the president of Egypt too, but no one clearly confirmed their visit. Officially, the reason is what's happening now in the Gaza Strip, the withdrawal of IDF forces from certain regions. They're tying their refusal to that. But what do you think? Is that really the objective reason, or do they just not really want to meet with Putin and discuss anything with the Arab League right now?
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Yeah, the Russian dictator actually commented on this at the press conference in Dushanbe.
Because
he himself was the one who initiated the postponement so as not to create complications, because the negotiation process accordingly regarding Palestine and the announcement of a ceasefire there. But honestly, it seems to me that this is connected to the fact that Russia has simply stopped being a player in this region. Again, maybe they haven't left Syria, but, we don't hear anything at all about the Syrian base, whether it's there or not. Apparently, they somehow made some arrangements, but they're just sitting there quietly. And as for Libya, accordingly, Turkey's influence as a result and Azerbaijan's security in the region are increasing. And when I analyze what could have been discussed there, it's Russia and the Arab League. Note the Arab League. What does Russia need the Arab League for? There were times when they supplied weapons there. There were times when within OPEC they had some disputes and negotiations with certain states because Russia is part of OPEC Plus. Now Russia is unable to increase production due to technological limitations, and many decisions as a result of the Russian invasion and global weakening are being made outside of Russia. So maybe that's the main reason. Well, really, Oreshnik is only for Russian television. What other topics are there? Overall, if you look at the Arab region again, Russian influence there is declining, while American and Chinese influence, on the contrary, are growing. And who is filling the Russian void? Well, it's precisely those two countries.
Roma, just to wrap up, I want to ask you an emotional question. What on earth is going on in Trump's head? I just saw his screen message. Trump thanked Putin for criticizing the Nobel Committee because apparently Donald Trump is really the one who solves world wars, starts them, and yet this terrible committee doesn't nominate him. And Donald Trump reposted all of this and wrote, "Thank you very much, President Putin. How can you send tomahawks against the backdrop of such messages? How do you see this?"
In fact, what we're seeing, the whole story with the tomahawks, let's just clarify again, is that this is being used as a bargaining chip in negotiations. Honestly, I almost don't believe it will actually happen, but if it does, it would mean there has to be some kind of signal, some sort of bizarre therapy session between the Russians and Americans for them to go through with it, but in reality, they're playing a game. There is a certain logic to these words, even if it's unpleasant and not entirely clear to us. It's like they rattled the tomahawks a bit, and it's worth noting that Putin didn't threaten anyone, not even the Americans. He just said they would only reinforce air defense, so in a way he's backing down from confrontation. Trump saw this and responded, suggesting they should negotiate. So the issue still boils down to the main goal that the American state is pushing for, a freeze. All this talk about tomahawks, this exchange of pleasantries, it's all aimed at that. Especially since, as Donald said, if there's no truce in Palestine, then it's time to focus on Russia. Those are his words. He's saying that just a bit more, and we'll all have to urgently sit down at the negotiating table. Well, that's possible, but only under the right pressure from the Americans. So I wouldn't really worry about it. The key point is that in this war, the Americans are more on our side than the other way around, and all this fuss about the Nobel Prize is just a passing thing.
Thank you so much. Aman Cymbaluk, journalist and blogger, was live on Ukraine Today. Roma Bergi here. Thank you.
Bye.